recording.
Hi, welcome everybody. This is our Unexplained panel with our lovely panelist, Brandy Stark. She, hang on while I'm thinking about this. Okay, let me change it so you can see Brandy. Although Brandy's, I hope you guys can see it. It's not doing, oh, there it is. Okay. Sorry, the video was doing weird things on my end. Anyhow, let me try that again. So, welcome Brandy. Brandy's our local paranormal expert. She lives across the bay from me here in Tampa. She lives over in St. Pete. And she's joining us again. Brandy's also a professor. She does paranormal events and ghost hunting. She also happens to dearly adore pugs. They are the cutest things in the world. I've met most of them. And she's also an artist and does some fabulous wire artwork. So without any further info, welcome Brandy and take it away.
All right. So I'm just going to give you a heads up that Zoom and this computer can be a little moody. So if anything starts freezing up, I'll just try to pause and let it catch up. But I've never quite figured out why, because I actually teach live online with Microsoft Teams, which is an infinitely worse program, and it doesn't lag. I don't know. I try not to think about these things. But yes, so what I have for you is actually a little, let me get my share screen button up. And I actually have a little PowerPoint. I know it's very exciting, but sometimes it's just easier to kind of organize thoughts. So I did a really basic kind of what is the supernatural idea, what is the unknown, and then I did leave a section for questions. I focused mostly on ghosts, hauntings, apparitions, that type of thing. But I have in the past had investigations where, for example, people have claimed elementals have shown up. I had one person tell me that I had an angel attached to me. God bless that poor thing. So, I mean, you never know. But I do have a couple of unexplained, there were times where I have been driving where I don't know how I avoided hitting, like in an accident. And so maybe they're right. I don't know. People here are crazy, and I drive a Miata, so I try to be very careful. But there have been a couple times where I'm like, how did I not get into? We're not questioning. We're going to be very happy for that. So at the very end, I also just revamped the Spirits of St. Petersburg book. It is a 2025 edition, and a little embarrassed because essentially the older edition started off as smaller books that I kept compiling together, and it unfortunately looked like that. There was also a file corruption, which I had to fix, but the new book should have all of that fixed now, and I did reorganize it, and I added a couple extra stories in there, and then I'll start a new one because everybody's like, please stop working on that first one. Do something else. So it's all good. Okay. Now, entire screen. All of this sounds like Teams. All right. And so I want to go here. So if you are not seeing this, please do let me know. Okay. And where's my present? Because that's going to be too easy. Oh, slide. No. Well, man, I cannot remember. Oh, slideshow. It's really weird when you go from Microsoft to kind of Google, but Google comes with a lot of things these days. So even though everything is almost always similar, there are days where I'm like, this looks weird. So anyway, this is what I've got. So the first thing I do want to present is that the paranormal is usually a pseudoscience. So this goes way, way back. I am a professor of religious studies and humanities and literature, so I get to study this stuff on a regular basis. But essentially, if you will, pseudoscience means that there is no canon. So technically, even with paranormal investigation, even with the TV shows, you still do not have a laboratory setting. It is not regulated, and different teams have different flavors, and that gets to be interesting. Some are very belief or faith-based. Some borrow ideologies from TV. People will learn from TV and then go out and try to do things. So We do see in the paranormal field also some materials and ideas that are pulled from one field and used in another. For example, something called an SLS gaming camera. It was initially used for gaming, but has become more popular in paranormal investigation. And that is actually not unusual for science at all. We do see this happening in other fields, but um, the issue is that we haven't gotten a canonized definition of a ghost and standardized enough laboratory settings to quantify the investigation. So it gets to be kind of funky and weird, but it's fun. Now, the religious studies professor in me is like, yes, I teach on this. It's called a new religious movement. It is spiritualism. It's kind of one of the origins of this. Now, the idea of ghosts goes across cultures. It goes across time. I have studied, actually, I've been doing some werewolf studies and vampire studies as well. But it is actually pretty interesting to see, this goes all the way back to the Epic of Gilgamesh, right, with Enkidu coming back as a ghost. Some also claim that Enkidu is like the first werewolf, which is kind of interesting, but that's another discussion. So when the ghostly idea manifests in the ancient cultures, they were a little bit cooler with it. But once we get the advent of Christianity, we get Augustine of Hippo. In fact, I just taught on this for the Dance Macabre, and he is a bit of a panty waist when it comes to ghosts. He is a 4th century bishop from North Africa. He essentially starts off as a pagan. He converts to the Manichaean philosophy, which is kind of a Zoroastrian Christian hybrid, and then he goes to mainstream Christianity. And he was a bit of a mama's boy, and part of his reasoning for no ghosts is that if there were ghosts, his mother would have shown up for him, and that drives me nuts. But the other reason, of course, is he's going to point biblically. So those early scholars did actually look at the scriptures, and you have the story of Dives in Luke 16, and basically the story is a wealthy man and his brother. They totally suck. Not that we see that in politics today, but they are treating the poor terribly. So what ends up happening is one brother dies, he goes to hell, and he calls across, to the higher powers, the bosom of Abraham, and he says, "Can I tell my brother not to do this?" And the answer is no. So Augustine was also going to start kind of putting up these little kernels that essentially the divine order is heaven or hell. He puts forth the kernel of purgatory, that if you're not good enough for heaven, but you're not bad enough for hell, you can go to purgatory to get all of those last sins removed so that you can go to heaven. Most of us get that route according to early Christianity, because really only the saints get to pop into heaven. So the idea of ghosts kind of a no-no for many, many years. And of course, they're also tied to the Tanakh or Old Testament scripture, which has about 11 different rules about, not consulting these things. But in the 1800s, with the rise of modernism's interesting because it does a 180 from what existed before. And it starts breaking with tradition. So when I teach humanities, I will actually do kind of like the historic presentation of a revenant, a werewolf, a ghost, and then the modern presentation of the same, the zombie, the werewolf, and the ghost. And we try to talk about what happened in between, because there is an obvious transformation. Whereas earlier they're related to religions, and later it's related to werewolves and vampires and revenants. It's a form of disease, and you also end up with predatory practices with zombies, werewolves, and vampires preying on humankind. Ghosts get a little bit of a different mix, but hopefully we'll get to that. So anyway, in the 1840s, we get the Fox sisters. They are the early spiritualists. The story is that they had a home in Rochester, New York, and this house had been sold to their father very cheaply. And whenever you find a house that's really cheap but also really awesome, there's usually a problem. And that problem was that it was haunted. And they called the spirit Mr. Splitfoot, and through a series of knockings for yes and no, they got his story, and he had been a peddler, a door-to-door salesman that the prior homeowner had killed and buried in the basement. And of course, years later, they say that they knocked down a wall and they discovered the guy's skeleton. The thing is that they could take this on the road, and Mr. Splitfoot could travel with them. This starts this rather interesting worldwide movement. And this movement typically is feminine because women seem to be more receptive to this than men. And that is still the idea today, believe it or not. I would still say probably 75 to 80% of paranormal investigators are women. But what you see on TV are men. It's really interesting. So this becomes a threat to the Christian churches because women, who are kind of the core of the churches, start going to these seances. And so you have a little bit of pushback against that. Now, practitioners of spiritualism also say that they did this in the full light of modern technology. So spiritualists are one of the first to utilize not only knockings, but also cameras to capture images. And just in case you're curious, some of the famous spiritualists are Sir Conan Doyle of Sherlock Holmes history, Abraham and Mary Lincoln. They lost a child, and man, she was really desperate to contact her dead son. And even Thomas Edison kind of played with this. One of the prototypes to the record player was essentially a device that he was trying to create to talk to the dead, believe it or not. Now, spiritualism peaked during the Civil War because you have massive death in the United States, and women who are left behind need that closure. And so you actually see this rise of spiritualism trying to find out what happened to their beloveds. By the time we hit World War One, now World War One was the Great War, supposed to be the last war. Lots of people, didn't we lose what, 10 million? It was a big number, and nobody ever talks about World War One. We always jump to World War Two, but and again, this unprecedented amount of death brings people into this ideology. But after World War One, it begins to fade, in part because technology becomes more accessible to people and because they catch frauds. So there were folks that would go to look through the obituaries, finding somebody that lost a family relative. And in the Victorian time period, when photography was coming out, you could get that last picture with your beloved with the death photography, which is really creepy. But they figured this out, but they took it to the next level, and they would go and they would find models. They would take a picture of this person, sometimes covered with cheesecloth. They would partially develop the print, and then they would reuse the plate, and they would get a double exposure. And eventually, this really was discovered. Part of the fraudulent nature was, again, people didn't know how cameras worked, and that will be important as we go forward. I would say that spiritualism comes back in the 1990s because we are going to see the rise of millennialism. Oh, goody, the end of the world is coming, right? The apocalyptic undertone. And I remember, I remember worrying at Y2K, is this going to happen? But there's also a transformation of thinking. So we start seeing parapsychology come up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I watch Perry Mason episodes with my mom, and they have a psychic in a couple of the episodes. You'll also find it with Quincy, ME. It's Ironside. All of these shows, they dabble just a little tiny bit. And I'm sorry to say they don't get it right at all, but nonetheless, it shows that there's a subculture of interest that still exists. But in the 70s and 80s, we're going to start seeing an explosion of modern technology. Even if it isn't what we have today, it's still better. So one thing that's going to become very popular, EVPs, or electronic voice phenomenon. Basically, the idea is that there was a fellow who went out to record bird songs, and he just left a tape recorder playing. It was an old reel to reel, and when he played it back, there were these mystery voices on it, right? Now, as the 70s and 80s, and even this new interest in the 90s starts bringing an awareness of the paranormal, that pseudoscience kind of becomes an issue again. Scientists have to come together, and they're like, you cannot present this as real. It is still a pseudoscience. We don't know what's going on, granted, but this also doesn't fit, right? So they actually did band together, and I believe it was 1997. I'll double check that date, but the paranormal TV shows that were coming out end up being reclassified, and so they become entertainment, which is fairly impactful when it comes to the new ghost shows that come out in the 2000s. But we start seeing things like X-Files, which in addition to the ghost, you can also watch these cycles. It's really cool. So the 90s was into aliens and vampires, right? We had Buffy the Vampire Slayer and we had X-Files. Um, the 2000s, we do see this explosion with Ghost Hunters as a quote unquote unscripted show. These were typically very cheap shows to produce. What people don't know, and I actually just did a ghost tour this month, and I had a woman who had a friend who worked at the Vinoy. And the Vinoy shows up in season 2 of Ghost Hunters. And the haunted room is 523. And they come up with this footage of the door, the closet door opening on its own, which I always thought was interesting. But I became, I was always a skeptic of the shows. They simply got too much stuff. And they presented paranormal investigation like it's this exciting 24-hour like ghost manifesting everywhere. And at that point, I'd already been doing this since 1997, and I'm like, this doesn't happen. I mean, it just doesn't. People don't understand editing, etc. They don't understand the entertainment value that has been placed here. And indeed, on this ghost tour, this woman whose friend worked there during this time, he was actually there when they did the episode, and he had told her, and she told me, so it's a friend of a friend thing, but that it was indeed, it was fake, that they faked it because they only had so many days that they could be there, and if they didn't get evidence in order to create the entertainment value, they could fake it. And they did eventually get caught with that, and I think that was part of the reason that the Ghost Hunter show eventually fell apart. Ghost Adventures takes it a whole nother way, and I was never a fan of that, in part because they were so taunting and disrespectful. So they also kind of added some pseudo religion in there, and not a fan. Yet, I mean, it made these people. There was a term that came out, which was, what was it? Parafamous, something along those lines, that you actually had these subgenres of paranormal people that became superstars for a while. I was just like, yeah, okay. It also gets to be somewhat interesting because there were paranormal conventions. A lot of those have dropped off. So you can kind of see this cycle moving out, in part because people went out, and I had a hard time with the Spirits of St. Petersburg because people were watching these shows and they would want to join and they would expect this to be like, I'm going to hear from my dead sister, or and it just doesn't happen that way. Um, so trying to present a reasonable, compassionate, historical viewpoint was really going against what people were seeing in these shows. So it was crazy. When we deal with paranormal investigation, and these slides looked cooler before, but they were supposed to kind of look like the edge of a page, but oh well, I'll have to move qualitative over. Qualitative research is what I worked with my doctorate, and I believe very strongly in this. And I think actually quantum physics may be catching up with me now. Take that. But the idea is that we do impact and we interpret our realities, right? And this is becoming something that is discussed more and more. And in fact, in modernity, what I'm hearing is timeline shifts or quantum shifts. And this is all over TikTok. I mean, it's really interesting. And I'm trying to kind of see where to place that yet. It hasn't quite clicked in my mind, but it's getting there. But with qualitative research, it is still the investigator who is the primary contact and who is studying the equipment. The lens of belief is going to become important, as is purpose. So for the Spirits of St. Petersburg, I've always wanted to present a reasonable and compassionate view towards the supernatural. I do advise people not to poke at it, please. But if something is happening, they just need to be really calm. They need to take a step back, and it's hard as heck. I totally get that. I have had a couple things happen in my own house, but you cannot fear this because the fear just becomes amplified. It becomes psychological. And depending if we are dealing with disembodied consciousnesses, does it impact them as well? So you got to step back and try to be nice, if you will. Try to figure out what they want or why they're there, and then see if you can come to a conclusion. Now, now this is the type, this is the unexplained part, and then I do have, and I am hoping to heavens they play properly, but I do have a few little videos and EVPs just for you to hear. And then at the very end, there'll be questions, comments. I'll plug the website and the book, so there'll be all that. But when it comes to the paranormal, and there are times where I find different teams classifying things differently, but for us, a haunting is typically a non-intelligent interaction. So if every night you see a Scotsman walking through your kitchen and into the wall, he doesn't interact with you, it's almost like a sight recording. And I do believe that locations can hold that energy, but that over time, that energy usually dispels. As the next person comes in, that energy kind of gets displaced or dispelled over time. Ghosts themselves actually do age out, believe it or not. They become weaker and less seen, which would explain why, we're not seeing, there's one set of Roman legionnaires in England that sometimes show up, and that's about it. So ghosts from many years ago begin to fade. An apparition is what we're looking at, and that is intelligent and interactive. A poltergeist, because of the movie, I hesitate with this somewhat, but the idea with the poltergeist is that they have a much more direct connection to the material world, which includes impacting the material world. You can have something called apportation, where objects will disappear and reappear. Ghosts like metal, so I'm like, hey, no wonder I like them so much. I've got my metal wire, they've got their metal. They love metal. They'll take jewelry, utensils. One of my very favorite stories was from a friend of mine who lived in a haunted house in Georgia. And he would hear disembodied footsteps, like in the fall, like coming up their walkway, walking through the leaves. And there was one day where he could not find his scissors. And finally, he just got exasperated and said, look, whoever took the scissors, please return them. And he said they landed at his feet. I'm like, well, at least they didn't throw them at you. That could be worse. We also have a crisis apparition. These are very, very common. They're more common than you think. These are usually one-time or limited time manifestations of a ghost. Family fits into this. When my father passed away, for the first 6 months after his death, I had 3 very strong instances where I knew he was here. Now, after those 6 months, it really faded away. It stopped. But I get a lot of family stories, and it's usually mothers, fathers, husbands, wives, or close relatives, which is why I tell people, you always need to be nice to your parents because they'll show up again. My mother loves that, by the way, so she's already planning for things. The other one is a drop-in, and that is, we have no idea why it's there, how it got there. It has nothing in the history of the location. Ghosts aren't bound necessarily by the same rules of time and space. That's what makes them liminal, and they can move. So Janus Landing has a helpful ghost that on occasion will pull people out of mosh pits when they feel like they're beginning to suffocate and they're overwhelmed. And I've had 2 firsthand reports of this, both men. They both described the same experience, feeling somebody like put their body around them and push the crowd back, if you will, and then pull them out of the crowd. And when they turn around to say thank you, they're completely alone. The problem is that Janus Landing has no deaths. We looked it up. The worst thing I found was the insane clown posse where somebody like hurt their foot, and that was about it. One of the owners might have been involved in a death, but charges were never brought up. So who this is, why they're there, we don't know. We can speculate. Perhaps this was somebody who died at a concert. Maybe there's that sympathy. Maybe they like the energy. I mean, music and art and the crowds, but we don't know. And so those are highly annoying because how do you prove that? It's tough. The researcher as the instrument also has to use sensory, sight, sound, touch, smell, and happily, very rarely taste. That would be weird. You can sometimes have the sensation of a presence where you feel like somebody's in the room with you, or you can also sometimes feel a charged atmosphere. I am not particularly intuitive, but over the years, I have even found myself with that sensation. So it is kind of interesting. Now, it could be suggestive. I do try to rule that out with my team by sometimes throwing in what I call control investigations where there is no haunting that is recorded, so that they're kind of not always expecting something. And I hope that kind of works. There's also the psychological state. This is something that happens in real estate as well. For example, the Amityville Horror House has sold a few times. It has the psychological impact from the movie and from the book. And I do not think it actually happened. I think the Lutzes made it up. But because of that, there's psychological impact. When my mother bought her house in 92, somebody had committed suicide in the garage. And that did have to be revealed because it, number one, is part of public record because of the cops coming. And number two, for the psychological impact. So happily, you know, my mother's first graduate degree was in psychology. And at that point, she was still poo-pooing the whole ghost thing. So that was fine, I guess, for her. Things that you use to research: notebook and pen. You have a team because you want multiple witnesses. Sometimes you'll think something happened, but somebody else might be able to see something or hear something or track something for you. Sounds in particular. Public record research, Google, history museums, and interviews. We have an archivist that sometimes will not go on cases with us, but will do research literally while we're investigating. So none of us have it. And in fact, tonight I'm doing a ghost tour in Rosa Park where this happened. One of these cases, I actually got the house number inverted. So I had sent her the information right before the case. She found nothing. So we got there and I'm like, oh crap, it's not, you know, 810, it's 801. And she started doing research while we were there, and it was so strange because my sensitive, the person who is attuned, came in and she's like, I think somebody had a heart attack here. She said, I feel a sharp pain in my chest. I'm like, okay, it's not you, right? She's like, nope, but somebody here died of a heart attack. When my group went upstairs, the upstairs bedroom, they're like, I feel off kilter. I feel like I can't breathe. I feel very dizzy. And this was multiple reports from several people. Well, the research came in. She's like texting me as they're doing this. And sure enough, in the 1960s, there had been a person living there who had a heart attack outside of the house. He was doing yard work, fell off a ladder with a heart attack, broke a leg and an arm, got to the hospital, and later died. And then 10 years later, in the upstairs bedroom, a woman died in a house fire. And I'm just like, okay, okay, really is real. And that's so cool when that happens. We also have EMF meters, we have our recorders, and good God, document everything. I tell my people, I don't care, document it. I have a running log when people tell me about hauntings that I will go and I will just enter the date. If I know the person, if not, you know, individual on ghost tour, and I will do a summary because you never know when that is going to become important. So document, document, document. All right, I'm going to hope this plays. Sorry. Are y'all able to hear sound? Do I need to push another button?
I don't hear anything.
Okay, let me escape. Let me see if there is a. We're almost done, actually. How do I share sound? Let me see. Let me see if this works like Teams. Oh my. Okay. Also share system audio. Okay. Screen. Now.
Brandy, we can't hear you.
Yeah, Brandy, I think you're muted.
Yeah, it muted you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. No, it's better to know because I'll go on with my story. All right, can you hear me? And you can see the presentation.
Yes.
Yes, we just
Okay.
still can't hear the presentation
Right.
thing that was playing.
Let me try it. Let's see.
And something that you did turn your microphone off by
Okay,
accident.
do you hear any sound with that?
No. Well, it means it's not moving.
It's yeah, it's also
No,
not
I
playing.
paused it. I paused it
Oh,
for a
okay.
second. Okay, I'll give you the background. We'll try again.
Right.
But this house had one owner, one cat, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. That was it. It was adorable. It's a 1925 house, which makes me very jealous because mine is 47 and too young, but that's fine. So he would hear footsteps in the back room, which was an enclosed porch. Um, he could look through the house. I mean, literally, you could be in the living room and look straight back, ain't nothing there. So we were doing our investigation, and one of the complaints that he had is that his lights would randomly shut off. So because of the nature of the house, because we're inside, this is a very zoomed in version. But what you'll get to see is the EMF meter. So this is an electromagnetic field meter that is recording fluctuations in EMF. And the idea is that when a ghost manifests, you get that fluctuation. And we are kind of sitting probably 10 feet back. So this is not our equipment interacting with it. You will actually possibly hear somebody say it's spiked, but that could be the air conditioning. We actually had to go find the AC vent and the unit to make sure it was not interfering. But right at the end of the session, the lights shut off by themselves. And it was actually the second time that night. I did ask the homeowner, I said, does this normally happen? And he said, it never shuts off more than once. So I guess we were special. It was really exciting. So we'll see if this makes any sound. It's only 45 seconds or so. You're always happy. I'm like, woohoo, thank God something happened. Were you able to hear the sound at all?
I didn't hear anything
I
on my.
I
heard
don't-
tiny little
Yeah,
Just barely.
yeah,
Okay.
little glitch. I don't even know what to call them.
Little blips. Okay. Well, that means I can't play my AVP for you, but it's short. We'll see. So
But I
essentially,
saw the flickering of the actual the needle. So
Oh.
yeah.
and that was so cool because at one point the question is he wanted to know this. It turns out that on the property in 1979, and we found the newspaper articles, 2 neighbors got into a fight. One was 18, the other was middle-aged. The 18-year-old pummeled the older guy. They were drinking beers because this was 79 Florida. The older man worked for the younger man's parents and started to kind of like run down his mother, which you never do to a kid who's 18. So the 18-year-old literally beat the bejesus out of this guy. They literally found blood splatter in there. The man was still alive, but he was strong enough to throw the man out from the back porch into the backyard where he was discovered. People thought he was drunk and passed out, and he ended up in the hospital for about 10 days. Nobody even alerted his wife. I mean, this whole thing really reeked of cover up. The investigator himself actually got put on leave because he did not accurately report what happened. I mean, it was, and this family owned a bar and they probably owned a couple businesses. So, quite frankly, I would not be surprised if it was a cover up. The man did die 10 days later. The young man went up on second-degree murder charges and died in jail in about 2008. And the current homeowner got the house in about 4 years ago. So knowing what was happening to the story was that huge spike that you saw. It was so incredible. And in fact, this will be one of the stories I tell tonight on the tour. Oops. Great, sorry. Can I go to
Yeah,
the
I
next?
can see I definitely see the fluctuation of the, the needle
Oh, and
moving.
right before the lights go out, the thing just blew up. And the thing is that we did things like we tested the circuit breaker to see if a circuit had been tripped. The homeowner gave us permission, and we're like checking to see the patterns of the lights with the various circuits, and it did not match up. I mean, this was a total blackout that had happened twice that night. This was the second one that we did catch on camera. And that, oh my gosh, it was really, really neat. After the investigation for about, and I always tell homeowners after an investigation, things will settle down. We do not push entities out. That is not our job. I do have one person that will work independently, but you need to request this. But we're there to find out who's there and to quiet the household. And usually for about 6 weeks, everything will be very quiet. So just be aware of that, because it takes a lot of energy to do this. And literally for the next about 2 months, the lights stopped going off, and then they started up again. He actually did see the entity one time directly, and so we did have to kind of go back and try to make it. And the entity didn't do anything. It was standing at a window looking out, and apparently, as soon as it saw that he saw it, it just vanished. So it was kind of interesting. But he has a cat named Raw, and this cat like literally moved in with him. He was a neighborhood stray, and the cat picked him and his house and just moved in. And I always love that. He's an older, probably partial Siamese, and the cat would not sleep in the bedroom after the entity had been seen, and we actually had to re-cleanse the area, which he requested, and the cat came back. So it's just trying to kind of keep everything calm. This one is more of a visual. You won't be able to hear the theremin, I'm afraid, but this is when you have multiple pieces of equipment going off. The cheapest piece of equipment that you can buy, by golly, is a cat toy. One that you tap it and it lights up. I love these things. They're brilliant. So this is actually the EMF going off. A theremin is like the old-fashioned sci-fi theremin that you put your hand near and it makes a noise. It went off, and the cat toys went off together. And they thought I might have tapped the table. So I'm like, okay, I am sitting way back here. Do you see this now? So if anybody is here, can you make those go off again? And they do. The other really cool thing is that at one point I actually asked the entity, can you make these toys light up? Let me show you. And I pushed one and it lit up. And when the entity decided to communicate, it lit the same one. So I was just like, yay! This is like totally what I love. So sorry guys, I'm getting like really enthusiastic, but this is a short one too. I hope. Oh, that was good.
Brandy, can you describe what we're seeing on this video? It's a little.
Did it work?
So the two blinkings, the interesting lights go on.
Yeah, but what's on the left side and what's in the
Okay.
background on the right?
So this is the EMF meter. And over here, that is a video camera. So we were actually doing 2 videos. So that's why this angle is different from this angle. So we had a camera directly in front of the EMF meter and the cat toys. And then a second camera, that's why this is kind of staggered like this. So this is the second camera on the other side, also recording the opposite view, making sure that nobody's touching the table. We also have a theremin, which I think is this little device here. And the weird noise in the background, I don't know if that played for you, but we also had a spirit box going. I forgot about the spirit box, but a spirit box is something that is supposed to scan radio waves and produce kind of like a white noise, and entities are supposed to be able to utilize it to vocalize. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it do some stuff. I'm not the biggest fan, but I also don't discount it. We actually had a case in which one of my investigators named Christy had said something at the very beginning, like, I would love to have something happen here. So, please, if you are here, let us know. And we had this buzzing box, if you will. And throughout the night, it actually said her name 3 times. Wow. So at 3 separate locations. And that, whew, you're just like, thank you. Thank you. So at one point, and I'm sorry the sound isn't playing through, but I wish it would. But at one point, somebody says, if you touch this ball, can you make it go again? And so that was the second time it lit up. And at one point she said, when she said, can you make it go again? I said, please. And so she added please to it. Always be nice to your ghost, right? Oops. Sorry. It's being a picky. Okay. The next one, this is infrared. This is a 4-second video and it does not have sound. This is from my studio, which actually is haunted, which makes me very, very happy. It's very quick, 3 seconds. That was it. So what you want to do is you want to look at this blue hand. Do you see the little orb?
Yeah, like a light popped up and.
Yep. Now the studio is completely dark. This is not a bug. This is not a hair, because I test everything that I have. It only happened once. It has not happened since. I have had a bug captured on video only one other time, and that was very obviously a bug because of the movement. I have tried pug hairs in front of it. Hairs don't look like that on thermal cameras. So I also tell people you got to test everything and test it and test it and test it until you know what it's going to do so you don't get a false positive. And I am very, oops, why are you being such a pain? Okay, can I flip now? Okay. I'm sorry that you can't hear my little EVP. This one is from Albert Whitted, and it's one of my favorites because I don't hear anything. My team didn't hear anything, but we're in Albert Whitted Airport, and I am talking to a pilot. And I did have a little research on him. We were at kind of the reveal stage, and I kept saying, is this Mr. Tomlinson? Is this Mr. Tomlinson? And in the middle of one of these recordings, I said, is this Mr. Tomlinson? And I mean, I can try to play it, but I don't think you'll hear it. The voice comes back, a male voice, 2 syllables, Thompson. His name was not Tomlinson, it was Thompson. I kept calling him by the wrong name. I got corrected by a ghost on site. When the place was closed, it's only women and 1 pug. We didn't hear it there, but we heard it in the playback. And it was just, first of all, every time I go now, I'm like, I am so sorry, Mr. Thompson. So, sorry, please manifest. So I'll try, but if it doesn't play, I'm sorry. 6 seconds, come on, baby. I don't know if you were able to hear that or not.
No, it didn't go. Unfortunately, I think when you try to do multiple embedded audio things in the Zoom, it just doesn't like it. So it doesn't.
So, oops. Yay! I think this is like, yes, okay, Mr. Thompson. Okay, so finally we're down to the question portion. Just in case you're ever curious and you want to learn more, the Spirits of St. Pete website looks like this. We actually do have an archival section. This is we did some table tipping that didn't quite work out as planned, but it does give you some information about us and our classes and what we're doing. We have the investigation hub from 2024 to now, and then 2023 and before. And then if you are ever interested, I'll go ahead and plug Supernatural St. Petersburg and Paranormal Pinellas, the 2025 edition, which in theory, oh, people have been reading it. Oh, that's so cool. I mean, I just did this like 2 weeks ago.
Cool.
Yay, I have a 5-star rating. Sorry. I need to check my own stuff again. But, okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and I'll take any questions.
I have a quick question for you. This is actually related to the book series, The Atlantis Grail, because
Yes.
I do get into hauntings. There are some things about to happen in my book that's I'm working now, and it involves a location. So my question is, when you have specific hauntings, like haunted house, haunted tunnel, haunted whatever, what would it mean over time? Like, you said that they fade a little bit, or the hauntings just kind of lose their energy, or what exactly is the process there?
So essentially you will have some sort of something that happens that leaves behind an imprint and creates the entity. The entities are usually most active within the first 2 years, and then they slow down a bit. They will become more interactive with sensitives, so people who are able to sense the supernatural. They definitely will tend to appear for them more than the average person. But when you have a haunting, it's usually something that's going to manifest when you don't expect it. So that's part of the problem with the TV shows, is that they are trying to get things to manifest upon expectation. I have had so many cases where we're putting up equipment, we're not expecting anything, and that's when it decides to appear. Or even in my own home, I had no expectation for my dad, and he just kind of, popped in. I did not see him, but he did move objects for me. That was pretty cool. So, and essentially, these were objects that were related to him. That's how I knew it was my dad. So yes, over time, as new people move in, that energy might increase for a time. And then as the new energy comes in, as the new owner comes in, it typically fades. Or it becomes kind of a background energy. Does that make some sense?
Yes, it does. This is actually great. This is good to know, because yes, thank you. Because I was
welcome.
interested in like ghosts of like just ghosts versus the place being haunted. Like this, not just individual ghosts, but like that whole location being somehow
If you want something really fun to look up the Japanese yokai. So yokai is this huge category of ghosts that spans from actual deaths to urban legends to entities that are created because of an event.
yokai. How do you spell it? Y-O?
K-A-I.
Y-O-K.
Yokai,
Okay, perfect.
and it can even be the abstraction of feelings. There is a yokai that represents the 3 o'clock slump, and it is somebody walks into it. It looks like an invisible brick wall, and I'm like, well, that's exactly what that 3 o'clock slump is, right? It's like you walk into this wall and you have no more energy. It's incredible, and in Japan, it goes all over the place. So there are books on yokai. It really is amazing. They're fun. I actually have my students on occasion do yokai for college. So what would this manifestation be from the college experience? And usually they're afraid of deadlines. So yeah, I get it.
That's
Brandy,
Yes.
if you will DM Teri on those websites,
Sure, be happy to.
she can put it on something I can get to, and then I'll put those on Discord under the replay so that other folks can see it.
Okay, no problem.
Yep, that'd be cool. By the way, I was gonna say, my alarm just went off, so we need to wrap up so we can head off to our next panel. Do you have any last comments, Brandy?
Not really. If you want to come on a ghost tour tonight, we're doing it at Roser Park. And if you're out and about in St. Pete tomorrow, I'll be doing the Winterfest at Grand Central District with, I didn't get a chance to do this, but I've been doing some different types of art, which now include resin. So I've been playing
Ooh,
with
that's
awesome
gorgeous.
crystals and resin. So thank you. But yeah, if you ever have any questions, feel free. You can also contact me directly. It's either admin@spiritsofstpete.com or brandybstark13@gmail.com. I answer both.
Thank you
Awesome.
so
Thank you
much. This
so
was
much,
fantastic.
Brandy.
Well, a lot of fun. Thank you. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Guys, have a good one. Enjoy the convention.
Yes, thank you
Thanks.
so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.